It started with the rain, those slow, deliberate drops like the sky was thinking before it wept. I was at the sink, elbow deep in soapy water, rinsing off dinner's remnants. The apartment was quiet. Just me, the clink of plates, and the soft buzz of traffic outside. Then my phone lit up, face down on the counter. I wiped my hands quickly and picked it up. A FaceTime request from Silas. I nearly ignored it, thinking he might have accidentally called me while watching his favorite dinosaur show on the tablet. But something in me hesitated, and thank God I did. His face came into view, pixelated and shaking. His eyes were red-rimmed, his cheeks blotchy, his voice cracked and scared. "Daddy," he sobbed, struggling to breathe between words. And Bianca got mad. She said I ruined her day. She threw me out. My heart slammed into my ribs. "What do you mean, son? Out where?" My voice was calm, but only because panic hadn't fully reached its peak yet. Then he said it quiet, broken. "It's raining." "I'm outside." That's when my world stopped. There are things you can forgive, moments you can frame with logic, but not this. Not my boy. Not left in the cold while the sky spilled over him. Bianca, my wife Mariel's older sister, was supposed to be watching him, just for a few hours while Mariel and her mother went to finalize wedding preparations. I trusted them. I shouldn't have. I didn't even grab a jacket. I grabbed my keys, yanked my wallet off the counter, and flew down the stairs. Every red light on the road felt like a personal insult. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I didn't know whether I was sweating or crying. The GPS kept repeating her annoying voice as if mocking me. "In 400 meters, turn left." But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was Silas. When I pulled up to Bianca's house, I didn't even park properly. I left the car running and bolted out into the rain. The porch light was on, but he wasn't there. I nearly slipped running toward the side of the house. Then I saw him, curled up under the awning, his tiny hands wrapped around his dinosaur backpack like it could protect him from the cruelty of the world. He was soaked to the bone, shaking uncontrollably. His blue hoodie was stuck to his skin. Mud streaked down his jeans. His lips trembled from both cold and fear. "Daddy," he whispered when he saw me, and it was like those two syllables fractured something deep inside me. I didn't say a word. I dropped to my knees and wrapped him in my arms. His little fingers clung to me with the desperation of someone who wasn't sure I'd come. And for a second, I hated myself for ever letting him go in the first place. He sobbed into my neck, his breath hitching. "I was good, Daddy. I didn't mean to ruin anything." I closed my eyes and kissed the top of his soaked head. "You didn't ruin anything, buddy. You're the best thing I've ever had." I carried him to the car, clutching him like a lifeline. He was freezing. I cranked the heater and wrapped him in my hoodie, then buckled him in with shaky hands. My brain was sprinting, half on autopilot, half erupting with rage. I didn't even glance back at the house as we pulled away. I couldn't. If I had, I might have done something I'd regret. Back at the apartment, I wrapped Silas in every dry blanket we had. He looked so small curled up on the couch, like a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. I made him soup, nothing fancy, just broth and noodles, and fed him spoon by spoon until the color returned to his face. He finally started talking between bites. She was yelling, "Daddy." She said I was annoying, and then she opened the door and told me to get out. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wiped his mouth gently and kissed his forehead. It was only then that I noticed the faint red mark near his hairline. A bruise. "Did she hit you?" He nodded, then hesitated. "With a slipper." She said I made her head hurt. I closed my eyes again. The rage felt like hot coal in my chest, searing me from the inside. I tucked him in bed, stayed beside him until his breathing slowed and sleep finally claimed him. But I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of his bed for hours, watching him, thinking. Mariel and I had our problems, sure. But I never imagined this. Never imagined her family, people I'd invited into our lives, could turn on my son like that. And the worst part was, deep down, I knew they wouldn't see the wrong. They never did. That night, something changed in me. Something cracked wide open. It wasn't just about comfort or appearances anymore. It wasn't about being the calm one or the bigger person. It wasn't even about saving my marriage. It was about my son. It was about Silas. About that little boy trembling in the rain, still trying to be good even after being discarded like trash. I kissed his forehead one more time and whispered a vow into the darkness. They wouldn't get away with this. Not this time. Not with him. Not with me. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside me hadn't. Silas was still asleep, tucked in tight like a secret I had to protect. His small chest rose and fell under the quilt, one arm wrapped around his favorite plush dinosaur. There was a bruise on his temple now that had darkened overnight. I stared at it for a long time before I stood up, teeth clenched, and grabbed my jacket. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock when I got to Bianca's house. I walked straight up to the porch and pounded on the door until the champagne glasses on her hall table must have rattled. The sun was barely breaking through the clouds, but she opened the door like it was just another lazy brunch day. She was barefoot, hair up in a silk wrap, holding a champagne flute like it was part of her personality. "Oh," she said flatly when she saw me. The dramatic entrance. "Cute." I stepped forward. "What happened last night?" Bianca raised a brow and leaned on the doorframe like we were debating restaurant reservations. He was being a little tyrant, screaming, running around, getting underfoot. I told him to hush, and he screamed louder. I needed peace. I blinked at her, just once, then twice. "So your solution was to hit him? Then throw him out into the rain?" She actually had the audacity to sip from her glass before answering. "It was a slipper, not a damn belt. And yes, I put him outside, under the awning, mind you. He wasn't in danger. He needed to learn some respect." I took a slow breath, steadying the earthquake beneath my skin. "You laid your hands on a child. A 4-year-old. Oh, don't be so fragile," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You fathers nowadays are all emotion, no discipline. Kids need boundaries." Then came the line, the one that cracked my restraint wide open. "Your brat ruined my day." She said it so casually, like it was a fact. Like spilling wine on a dress or missing a manicure. My fists clenched without thinking. I wasn't raised to yell at women, but I wasn't raised to let them hit my child either. Before I could speak, another voice floated into the scene, Mariel's mother, Delphina, stepping out in heels and a silk robe, her eyes surveying the situation with bored disapproval. "Is this really necessary?" she asked with a sigh, looking past me like I was a bug on the windshield of her morning. I turned toward her. "You knew?" I asked, my voice colder than the morning air. She gave me a frown, like I was the one who'd disappointed her. She told me after. "Yes, but it's been handled." "Handled?" I echoed. "You mean ignored?" Delphina crossed her arms, posture sharp as a blade. "Boys need to learn their value. Life doesn't cater to sensitivity." I stared at her in disbelief, then back to Bianca. "He's 4 years old." 4. And you put him outside in a thunderstorm." Bianca's smirk returned. "Honestly, this overreaction is exhausting." For a moment, I saw red. Not metaphorically. My vision blurred at the edges, and I had to bite my tongue hard, just to keep myself from saying things I couldn't walk back. So I did the opposite. I turned around, walked away, not because they deserved silence, but because I was done warning people. I'd seen what they were capable of. Now they would see what I was capable of. At home, I found Silas awake and rubbing his eyes. He smiled when he saw me. God, that smile. He didn't know how close he came to being completely broken by the people who were supposed to protect him. I knelt beside him, pulling him into a hug. He smelled like lavender soap and morning breath and safety. "Daddy?" he asked, voice muffled against my chest. "Yeah, buddy? Are we going back to Andy Bianca's?" I pulled away just enough to look him in the eyes. "No," I said. "We're not going back there again." "Okay." He nodded, like that settled it, like he trusted me without condition. Later that evening, I made him soup again, his favorite this time, chicken and rice with little star noodles. I wrapped him in his Dino blanket, turned on his cartoons, and sat beside him while he laughed and slurped his dinner. But when he turned his head, I saw the bruise again, and something in me snapped, quieter this time, but deeper. I wasn't going to let that mark be just another forgotten injury in a childhood full of excuses. That night, after I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, right on the bruise, I didn't go to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside the window. I opened my laptop. I stared at the screen for a long time, then opened a blank document. I didn't write a report or a journal entry. I wrote a vow, not in words, but in actions. They thought they could strike a child, push him out into the cold, and shrug it off like spilled champagne. They thought being rich or important or loud made them right. They thought I'd roll over and apologize for reacting. They were wrong. This wasn't over. It had just begun. And the next time they wanted to toast to Bianca's big day, they'd be choking on the silence I'd leave in its place. I looked at Silas through the open door of his room. his chest rising and falling in rhythm with something purer than anything his mother's family ever offered. I whispered into the quiet, "They won't get away with it." And I meant it with every cell in my body. The next morning, I sat on the couch with Silas nestled beside me, his tiny hand curled around my thumb like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. His cartoons played low in the background, but neither of us was really watching. I'd barely slept. Rage and disbelief don't make good pillows. I had run through every version of last night's confrontation with Bianca and Delphina in my head, each one more damning than the last. I kept hearing that awful line, "Your brat ruined my day," and Delphina's dismissive shrug, like empathy was a cheap perfume she refused to wear. I waited until Silas was fully absorbed in his show before calling Mariel. She picked up on the second ring, her voice breezy and light, full of pre-wedding cheer. "Hey, babe," she said. "We just finished cake tasting. You would have loved the raspberry filling." I didn't waste time. Bianca threw Silas out into the rain last night. She hit him with a slipper and locked the door. Silence. Not the kind that comes from shock. This was the kind that annoyed people gave when they didn't want to deal with a problem. "Mariel," I prompted. She sighed. She told me he was being impossible. Screaming, throwing things. "He's 4, I cut in, trying to stay calm. And she left him outside. In a thunderstorm. "I'm not saying it was okay," she said, in that tone that always meant she was about to. But Bianca was stressed. "The wedding's a lot. You know how she gets." I pulled the phone away for a second just to remind myself not to break it. "You're defending her." "No, I'm not. I'm just saying, don't make this a thing right now. We're in the middle of planning a huge event." "She abused our son," I said, each word clear and deliberate. "She left a bruise on his head." He was sobbing. "Mariel." He called me. "Not you. Not your sister. Not your mother. Me." She hesitated again. "I'm sorry. I'm sure she didn't mean it. Maybe it came out wrong. Can we talk about this after the wedding?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. I ended the call without another word and stared at the wall. After the wedding? As if Silas's safety was an inconvenience to be penciled in later. My son, our son, had been thrown out like trash, and she was worried about raspberry filling and champagne flutes. An hour later, her mother called. "You can't seriously be upset over this," Delphina said without preamble. "Boys toughen up. It builds character." "It's not your place to decide how my son learns character," I replied. "I raised 3 children, and it shows." She bristled, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I hung up again. Gerald, Mariel's father, was next. His voice was lighter, trying to play the peacekeeper. "Let's not derail the wedding over a misunderstanding," he said gently. "Bianca may have overreacted, but we've all been there. Parenting isn't easy. Maybe a conversation is all that's needed." "No apology," I said. "Pardon. None of you have apologized. Not for what happened. Not to Silas. You're all acting like he's an obstacle, not a child." He paused. "That's not fair. We care about him." "No," I said. "You tolerate him because he's mine. But the truth is, you've never liked that I came from nothing. That I wasn't born into your country clubs and brandy-swilling circles. And because Silas has my blood, you treat him the same way." He didn't deny it. That silence? That was the answer. After that call, I stopped talking. Not out of helplessness. Out of strategy. I realized something in those hours of watching my son quietly color dinosaurs on the floor. They didn't see him. Not really. To Bianca, Delphina, Gerald, even Mariel, Silas wasn't a boy. He was a symbol of inconvenience, of disruption, of the parts of me they never wanted Mariel to be tied to. He cried too loudly, took up too much space, had too much of my grit and none of their polish. And that's what made him disposable in their eyes. They didn't see me as a father. They saw me as a placeholder, a name on a form, a man their daughter settled for. They smiled at me at brunches, shook my hand during holidays, nodded approvingly when I carried gift bags or offered to set up chairs. But I was never family. I was tolerated. But here's the thing about men like me, quiet, patient men. We don't explode. We don't scream in lobbies or cause scenes in restaurants. We endure. We bide our time. And when we act, we don't miss. That night, I watched Silas fall asleep with his dinosaur toys lined up beside him like little sentinels. His bruise had faded a little, but I could still see the outline. That one mark on his soft skin felt like 1,000 wounds on mine. And that's when I knew there would be no more asking, no more pleading, No more trying to make them see. They didn't deserve the chance. I would protect Silas not just from the next outburst or the next storm, but from the entire structure that allowed it. They thought I was disposable, but I wasn't. I was patient, and I was dangerous when quiet. I opened my laptop again, this time not for a vow. I opened old accounts, ones they didn't know existed. I pulled out paper files I hadn't looked at in years. Contact sheets. Investor decks. I still had every email from my startup days. I still had silent equity in ventures they didn't even realize I'd funded. While they chased clout and designer invitations, I had built stability in the shadows. Quietly. Efficiently. And now, with that same quiet precision, I was going to dismantle their illusion. They thought this was about a wedding. It wasn't. This was about a child with a soft voice and a bruised forehead who still found a way to say, "I love you," when the world tossed him aside. This was about a boy who trusted me to come get him. And I did. But that was only the beginning. Because love isn't just picking up your son in the rain. Love is making sure it never happens again. Love is drawing a line in the dirt and daring anyone to cross it. Love is being willing to become the storm if it means your child never has to stand in one again. So I sat there, in the still of my apartment, while the city outside drifted into sleep. And I planned. They wouldn't see it coming, but they would feel it. And they would remember the moment they dismissed a father who wasn't loud, but who had everything they underestimated. Because there's a difference between being forgotten and being underestimated. And I was never the family favorite, but I was about to be unforgettable. The morning after those calls, the ones that told me exactly what my family by marriage thought of me and my son, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm coffee that tasted like resolve. Silas sat across from me, in his paint-stained pajamas, a tray of finger paints and blank paper in front of him. He was focused, tongue sticking slightly out as he added little green spikes to the back of a yellow dinosaur. He didn't know that the adults around him had tried to break him. He didn't know he'd been discarded like clutter. And that innocence? I'd kill to protect it. While he painted, I opened my laptop. A familiar hum rose from the machine as it powered on, like an old friend waking up beside me. I hadn't touched these folders in years. Old investor emails, wire records, contact lists. They were all still here. A digital footprint of who I used to be before I shelved ambition to be a husband and father. But now, husband meant little more than a ring rusting on the wrong hand. And father? Father meant war. First, I opened my email client and typed out a message to someone I hadn't spoken to since our startup folded, Elias Pinner. We'd once been co-founders. I helped him build his new software venture in its infancy, but I stepped back when Mariel got pregnant. Still, I owned 15% equity as a silent partner. It had done well. Very well. Elias owed me, and he respected me more than anyone in Mariel's circle ever had. Subject: request for a discreet favor. Elias. I need access to liquid capital fast. I'll explain later. I trust you. Let me know what you can free up. And please, no noise. Lucas. 10 minutes later, he replied. Lucas. Whatever you need. I'll move $850,000 into a holding account by noon. Text me the routing. I sent him the details, closed the window, and moved on to the next item. Bianca's wedding venue, Casa Enright Vineyards, a sweeping estate an hour outside the city. It was supposed to be the jewel of her Instagram perfect wedding. Every photo, every tag, every hashtag already mentioned it. I'd been there once for a gala with Mariel. I remembered the woman who managed it, Mrs. Enright herself. Regal, brutal, efficient, but also practical. And her vineyard was a business. I called the reservation line and asked to speak to her directly. This is Mrs. Enright, she answered, her voice clipped, professional. How can I assist you? My name is Lucas, I began. And I'm calling with an offer to purchase full rights to the event slot scheduled this Saturday. The full-day vineyard reservation currently held under Bianca Delfina Rowe. A pause. That's a premium wedding slot, she said carefully. You'd be asking me to cancel a contract. I'm willing to compensate you for the breach, I replied, as well as pay double the original reservation in exchange for hosting a private gathering of my own. No press. No media. No. I'm the man whose son she left in the rain. Mrs. Enright was silent, but when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Understood. I'll send you the termination fees. You'll have the vineyard. No questions asked. We ended the call, and I made the transfer. Just like that, Bianca's dream venue was gone. I didn't gloat. Not yet. I watched Silas paint a blue volcano, and I wondered if he knew how much had changed in the last 20 minutes. If he could sense the shift in the air. If he could feel how the world was quietly, slowly turning in his favor. The next step was the guest list. Not for a wedding. Not for vengeance. For truth. I began compiling names. People who had been distanced by the rose, silenced by Bianca's ambition, or discarded for convenience. Old colleagues she'd undercut. Family she'd embarrassed. Childhood friends she outgrew the minute she tasted power. And among them, extended family from my side. People she never invited to anything. People who'd loved Silas like their own. Each email invite was the same. Subject, private gathering, celebration of courage and truth. No mention of Bianca. No mention of a wedding. Just, join us for a quiet gathering at Casa Enright Vineyards. A space to reflect, honor, and uplift what deserves light. Come if you believe in truth. It wasn't flashy. It was deliberate, targeted, quiet. Then I made another call. Bianca had hired a famous local decorator to stage the entire event. I knew his assistant. We'd worked together years ago. I called under a different name and requested cancellation of the entire order due to a family emergency. I sent a forged confirmation using Bianca's email signature, painfully easy to fake, given how often she flaunted it on Instagram captions. The decorator canceled without question. No drapes. No centerpieces. No custom nameplates or golden aisle runners. Just silence. By the time I looked at the clock, it was past 4 p.m. Silas was asleep on the couch, fingers still stained with paint. I carried him to bed and tucked him in, then sat beside him and watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest. I thought about the moment he called me. His little voice, what with tears. Daddy. Aunt Bianca got mad. I would never forget the way he sounded. The way he believed, without question, that I would come for him. And now I had. The next day, I kept my phone on silent. I knew what was coming. And right on cue, by early evening, it buzzed. Bianca. 5 missed calls. A voicemail that started sweet and turned venomous. Lucas. I'm hearing things. Crazy things. Did you seriously cancel my decorator? Do you think this is funny? You're obsessed. You've always been threatened by me, admit it. This isn't about Silas. You're just trying to make this wedding about you. Grow up. Fix it. Or I swear I deleted the voicemail. The next day, the buzz came again. Another call. This time I answered. You did this, didn't you? Bianca's voice was shrill, furious. The venue says it's booked. Gone. Gone. You canceled my decorator. You've been inviting people to your little party. You think you're clever. I was calm. Measured. You threw a child into a storm. He was screaming. He was 4. And he was scared. I needed peace, she shouted. You don't get it. He screamed and screamed and screamed. I had a headache. I couldn't think. And then he spilled juice on my shoes. I said nothing. He ruined everything, she hissed. No, I finally said, my voice a whisper. You ruined everything the moment you forgot that kids aren't burdens. They're people. You hit him. You locked him out. And then you bragged about it. You told people it was necessary. You think people wouldn't find out? You won't get away with this, she spat. I already did. Because I didn't lie. I didn't spin. I didn't need to. You threw a child into a storm, Bianca. I just reminded you that weather changes. Then I ended the call. The room went silent, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the calm of a man who'd done what he needed to do. Not for revenge, not for attention, but because sometimes the world needs to be shaken to see clearly. I walked into Silas's room, sat on the floor beside his bed, and took his hand in mine. This wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, I knew I was winning. While Bianca and the Rose spent their week in a frenzy of fittings, manicures, and filtered countdowns, I spent mine dismantling the facade brick by brick. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't post or threaten or yell into the void. I let them celebrate. I let them smile. Let them post boomerangs of champagne flutes clinking and perfectly posed bride tribe shots under hashtags like hashtag countdown to Bianca and hashtag Rhoda Forever. All the while, my own clock ticked in the background, not counting down to a wedding, but to a reckoning. Each day, I added more pieces to my gallery. Photos of Silas from the last few years. His first finger painting, his wide-eyed kindergarten award for kindness, his toothy grin at the zoo. I printed them on thick, high-gloss boards and framed them myself. Then I added the newer ones. The bruise. The soaked dinosaur backpack. A screenshot of his call to me, time-stamped in the storm. and in between them, quotes. Things they had said out loud and unashamed. He ruined my day. He needs to learn his value. Don't make this a thing. I worked at night while Silas slept. During the day, I let him play freely, uninterrupted, safe. He giggled on the living room rug with his Dino toys while I fielded quiet confirmations. Caterers for my event. A jazz trio. Sound tech. Lighting. I didn't ask for much, just warmth and honesty. I told them what the event was truly about. Not revenge, but truth. Not rage, but revelation. And all of them, every vendor I hired, respected the purpose. Some discounted their rates. One woman, who ran a local dessert boutique, offered to cater it all for free after I told her why I was hosting it. That poor boy, she'd whispered. I have 2 sons. Say no more. The decorators set up early. Instead of a bridal arch, we built a quiet canopy of photos and memories. A timeline of Silas, not edited for likes, but honest, raw, and beautiful. A little boy growing through sunshine and storms, standing strong despite the silence of those who should have spoken for him. At the center of it all was the image of him that broke me, a shot I took the night I brought him home from Bianca's. He was curled in my hoodie, lips blue, eyes wide. I had caught it accidentally on my phone when I tried to get his temperature, but I printed it large, because no one would forget. I didn't post a single picture online. I didn't need to. The invitations had already rippled through the right circles. I watched as RSVPs poured in, quietly, from people Bianca had long dismissed or cut off. We'll be there. Thank you for doing this. She's needed this mirror for a long time. And some didn't reply, but I saw them watching. Silent readers. The kind who would come not to gossip, but to finally see. I welcomed them too. 2 days before the wedding, my phone rang again. Bianca. This time I answered on speaker, while Silas panted beside me. You think you're clever, she said, her voice shaking with fury. You've hijacked my day. You think people won't figure it out? They'll figure out the truth, I said simply. That's the whole point. You can't just take what doesn't belong to you. You mean like throwing out a child because he didn't fit your mood? I countered. She was silent for a beat. Then the voice dropped lower. You've always been bitter. Mariel was too good for you. We all knew it. This is your way of punishing her. This isn't about Mariel. This is about a little boy who called his father from the rain. People will turn on you. I'm not the one who needs a veil to hide behind. I ended the call. Later that night, I got a call from the florist. Bianca's decorator had apparently tried to reinstate the original wedding order and discovered everything had been canceled and non-refundable. She was livid. I imagine the rows were scrambling now, assuming it was sabotage from a vendor, maybe a clerical error. They still hadn't pieced it all together. Not fully. They thought I was just angry. A hurt husband lashing out. They didn't understand yet that this wasn't spite. This was exposure. The next morning, I sat with Silas on the patio, watching the light stretch across the sky. He sipped cocoa from a dinosaur mug. I asked him how he felt. He said, safe. I nodded and smiled. That was enough. That was everything. Later that day, my phone buzzed again. This time from a cousin of Mariel's, Renee, who had always been the quiet one at family gatherings. I saw the invite, she said. I'm coming. And I'm bringing my husband. We always knew Bianca was cruel, but no one ever stood up to her. Until now. I thanked her. Told her no dress code. Just bring open eyes and ears. She said she'd bring flowers for Silas. I spent the rest of that day loading the car with the gallery boards, the framed photos, the small speakers, the nameplates of those who were coming. I had a table for Silas's paintings. I had a seat for him beside mine. And I had a spot, an empty chair, deliberately placed for Bianca, whether she came or not. The night before the event, I sat at the edge of Silas's bed, just like I had the night after the rain. I watched him sleep, the way his chest rose and fell with perfect rhythm. I brushed his hair back and whispered, they won't hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing. He stirred, murmured something, then turned over with a little hum. And that hum, that small, safe sound, was the only countdown that mattered to me. The rest of them could count down all they wanted. But time was never on their side. Mine had just begun. Saturday dawned cool and golden, the kind of morning where everything looked sharper than usual, like even the sun knew something was coming. I dressed Silas in his little gray suit, the one he wore last Christmas, and brushed his hair while he played with his toy Triceratops. He didn't know what this day would mean. Not really. But he knew we were going somewhere important. Somewhere where his name wouldn't be hushed. Somewhere he was seen. We arrived at the vineyard before the first guests. The decorators had already finished setting up. No ribbons, no floral arches, just truth, presented with dignity. The jazz trio played quietly in the corner, their smooth chords wrapping the air in a calm that felt almost sacred. On the main lawn, the photo gallery shimmered in the morning light. Images of Silas from babyhood to now. Interspersed were simple black cards etched with white text, quotes, timestamps, call logs. The evidence of what they'd ignored. The story they'd tried to erase. At the entrance stood a discreet sign. Private event. Celebration of courage and truth. The guests began to arrive slowly. Some wore confusion on their faces. Some wore curiosity. But none turned away. They walked the gallery like it was an exhibit of something sacred, pausing at Silas's kindergarten photo, some wiping their eyes when they saw the shot of him soaking wet in my arms. The one where his dinosaur bag clung to his side like armor. It didn't take long before the mood settled. This wasn't a protest. It wasn't drama. It was a reckoning. I stood beside Silas the entire time, hand resting gently on his shoulder. He looked around in awe, pointing out photos to people like he was giving a museum tour. That one's my birthday. That one was the zoo. No one patronized him. No one brushed him off. They listened. Then it happened. A flurry of white and gold stormed through the side gate like a hurricane in heels. Bianca. Hair swept up into a formal bun, veil askew, makeup already betraying her. Her dress, pristine and blinding, dragged behind her like a flag she couldn't stop waving. She froze at the edge of the lawn, her eyes scanning the crowd, then locking onto the gallery, and finally onto me. You, she shrieked, her voice slicing through the music. What is this? What the hell is this? The crowd turned. The musician stopped. Silas took a step closer to me and slipped his hand into mine. Bianca marched forward, her heels stabbing the earth with each step. You hijacked my venue. My day. You. Her voice broke off as she passed one of the gallery frames. She saw the bruise. The screenshot. Her words. Her expression shifted from fury to fear, then to a kind of desperate disbelief. You ruined everything, she screamed, tears streaking black down her cheeks. No, I said calmly, not moving. You did that the day you laid hands on a child. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She glanced around as if searching for someone, anyone, to step forward and defend her. No one moved. Even Mariel stood there in the distance, clutching her dress bag, her mouth slightly parted in stunned silence. Delphina wasn't far behind her, her lips pressed into a thin line like she'd swallowed poison and refused to admit it. Bianca tried again. It was one moment. One bad day. You think you're a saint? He was impossible. He was crying and yelling and kicking things. A voice cut through hers. Soft, but firm. Renee. He's for Bianca. Bianca spun around. Don't you dare start. No, Renee said, stepping forward. You threw a child out into a storm because he annoyed you. Then you bragged about it. And now you're shocked people are listening. The words hung in the air like smoke. Bianca's face crumpled. You don't understand. I needed quiet. He wouldn't stop screaming. So you made him scream alone in the rain, another voice called out. I didn't recognize who said it, but others began to murmur. Nods, head shakes, crossed arms, a wall forming. Bianca stood there trembling, her fists balled at her sides. He's not even mine. He's a child, I said. A child you were trusted to protect. And instead, you bruised him and told him he had no value. You didn't just fail him. You exposed yourself. Silas looked up at me. Daddy, why is Annie crying? I knelt beside him and smoothed his lapel. Because some storms don't pass, son, I whispered. Some storms answer. I stood and faced Bianca. This wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. And now you're looking at what you made. She broke then. Whatever composure she had left snapped. Her shoulders sagged. Her makeup smudged. She turned and stormed out, veil slipping down, dragging her train behind her like the ghost of a ceremony that never belonged to her. Delphina started to follow but stopped. Mariel said nothing. Just stood there, watching me. Her eyes weren't full of hatred. They weren't even angry. They were hollow, empty. The way someone looks when they realize they've stood beside a sinking ship for far too long. She left, too, without a word. When the last of them disappeared through the gate, I turned back to Silas. He tugged on my hand. Can we go look at the volcano picture again? I smiled. Yeah, buddy. We can look at them all. And we did, one by one, while the crowd stayed, while music started again, while the truth, undeniable, quiet, and complete, settled over the vineyard like sunlight through broken clouds. That day was never hers. It was his. I don't know who leaked the footage. Maybe it was one of the guests who couldn't look away from the gallery wall. Maybe it was Renee. Or Victor, Mariel's cousin who worked in media and had been filming pieces of the event with his phone. It didn't matter who sent it out. What mattered was that by Sunday morning, the video was everywhere. Bianca, in her immaculate dress rehearsal robe, yanking the door open and screaming at Silas. The camera footage caught everything, his tear-soaked face, her hand flinging the slipper, her final shove as she forced him out with his dinosaur bag trailing behind him like discarded luggage. The rain, the slam of the door, the way his little fist pounded it, then stopped. It was gut-wrenching, unfiltered, real. The internet did what it does best, it judged. And for once, it judged correctly. The hashtags flipped overnight. Hashtag Rhoda Forever turned into hashtag Justice for Silas. Her curated feed flooded with comments, first soft confusion, then swelling outrage. Screenshots of her previous posts juxtaposed with the security footage created a brutal contrast. Smiles over bruises, toast glasses over tears. By mid-morning, 3 of her brand partnerships had publicly severed ties. One even issued an apology for ever supporting her voice. Her stylist reposted the video with a single word: unforgivable. Her influencer friends, the ones who built brunches into careers, began quietly untagging themselves from her posts. It didn't take long for her to start losing followers by the thousands. Silas and I stayed home. I made him waffles shaped like dinosaurs, and we built a cardboard volcano on the balcony. He giggled when we added red food dye to the baking soda mix. "It's erupting, Daddy," he squealed. And it was, in more ways than one. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mariel standing there. Alone. She looked exhausted. Her curls were still pinned from yesterday's failed wedding, but strands had escaped and clung to her cheeks. Her makeup was gone. No heels, no pretense. Just a woman carrying regret. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She didn't move past the hallway. She stared into the living room, watching Silas roll his toy cars along the floor. "He looks okay." "He is," I said, because I made sure of it. She closed her eyes for a moment. "I didn't know. Not about the footage. Not that it was that bad." I raised an eyebrow. "You knew enough. You heard what she said. You saw the bruise." I thought. "I don't know what I thought," she whispered. "That it would go away. That he wouldn't remember. That if I just got through the wedding, I could fix it after." I said nothing. The weight of silence pressed harder than any shout could. Mariel turned to face me. "Did you plan all of this to hurt them?" "No," I said, folding my arms. "I planned it so they could never hurt him again. This wasn't about destroying a wedding. It was about revealing what they tried to bury." She exhaled shakily. "They're furious. My mom's barely speaking. My dad won't answer press calls. Bianca's," she trailed off. "Bianca's learning what accountability feels like. She says you ruined her life." I looked past her toward Silas. "She ruined it. I just turned on the lights." Mariel nodded slowly. I saw the comments. "The video. It's worse than I imagined." "Worse," I said, stepping toward her. "You stood there. You heard her say he ruined her day. You heard your mother talk about his value like he was some pawn in her game. And you blinked. You told me not to make it a thing. I shouldn't have needed a video to make you care." She winced. "I know. You're right. Then why are you here?" She swallowed. "Because I needed to say it. I needed to say I'm sorry. And I needed you to know. I'm not them. Not entirely. At least, I hope not." I didn't speak. I just watched her, wondering if maybe regret had finally outweighed image. "They won't recover from this," she added. "Not the way they expect to. Neither will Silas," I said. "But maybe now, he won't have to grow up pretending none of it happened." She looked back at him again, her eyes glassy. "He's stronger than all of us." "He had to be," I said. "You gave him no choice." She turned slowly and walked toward the door, then paused. "What happens now?" I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back. "Grace?" She threw a child into the rain. "You called it learning his value. Tell me what part of that deserves grace." No reply came. Later, Gerald tried his version of reconciliation. "You could have spoken to us. You didn't have to destroy her life." I replied. "I didn't destroy it. I just pulled back the curtain. Then I blocked them both." Silas was asleep by then, breathing softly against his dinosaur pillow. I sat beside his bed and brushed his hair back gently, thinking of how close I came to trusting the wrong people with his heart. How many chances I gave them. How long I stayed quiet. How many times I swallowed my instincts to keep the peace. But not anymore. They were cold now. Rejected. Revealed. Isolated. And I? I had my son. I had the truth. And I had time. Time to rebuild, not from the ruins they left me, but from the foundation I chose. No more silence. No more storms unanswered. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in 3 days, Mariel. I was sitting on the balcony with a mug of tea long since gone cold, watching the streetlights flicker through the trees. Silas had gone to bed hours earlier after building a pillow fort and asking me to sleep inside it with him. I said yes. Then, once he drifted off, I crawled out and let him sleep in peace. There was peace in our apartment again. But now that name on my screen, Mariel, was like an echo knocking at the walls. I answered on the third ring. I can't sleep, she said quietly. I keep hearing your voice. The day you said, you threw a child into a storm. I keep replaying that. Over and over. I didn't say anything. You were right, she added, voice trembling. About everything. I didn't stand up for him. I didn't stand up for you. And I'm so ashamed, Lucas. I leaned back in the chair, the metal creaking under me. You asked me once if I did all this to hurt them, I said. But what I didn't say then is that this wasn't just about them. It was about showing the world what happens when silence becomes normal. When people prioritize comfort over care. I didn't destroy Bianca's life. She did that. I just let people see it, I think. I was afraid, she whispered. Of what? Of rocking the boat. Of challenging my mother. Of losing control. And deep down, I think I knew Bianca could be cruel, but I didn't want to believe she'd ever directed at my son. She did. And you blinked. I know, she said, the admission sharp with pain. But you didn't. There was a long pause on the line. My parents won't speak to me, she said next. They blame me for letting it get this far. For not shutting it down before the video spread. My mother said I betrayed the family. I almost laughed. The same family who saw my son as a nuisance? Who dismissed his bruises as toughening up? They're mad at you because you didn't keep their secrets. I don't want to be like them anymore, she whispered. Then don't be, I said simply. She was quiet again, and then her voice came back, almost too soft to hear. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. What would you have done if I had stood up for him? If I'd come home that night and wrapped Silas in a blanket like you did? I looked out over the city, thought about the weight of that question. I would have believed you loved him like I did. And maybe we'd still be figuring things out together. But I can't build my son's future on maybes. He needs to know he's safe. And you didn't make him feel that way. I want to fix that, she said. You don't fix it with words, I replied. You fix it with choices. Consistency. Showing up even when it's uncomfortable. I'm ready, she said. I want to show him he matters. Then don't tell me, I said. Tell him. Earn his trust back the way you lost it, one moment at a time. She didn't cry. I think she'd already done that in silence. But her voice was steadier when she said, Thank you, Lucas, for being who he needed, even when I wasn't. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Some things don't need punctuation. The next morning, a message from Gerald waited in my inbox. The subject line read, Reflection. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity pushed me. It was short. Lucas. I've replayed the video over 100 times. And every time, I see the same thing. A little boy crying for help. And none of us answering. We failed him. We failed you. I don't know if we deserve another chance, but I want to say I'm sorry. For my part. For my silence. For not being the grandfather he needed. If you ever decide to speak again, I'll be here. Gerald. I read it twice. Then I closed it. It wasn't time yet. Not for them. Not for me. That afternoon, I sat on the floor with Silas, piecing together a jigsaw puzzle of a jungle scene. He concentrated hard, tongue poking out slightly like it always did when he was thinking. After placing a final piece, he looked up at me. Daddy, are we going to another party? I smiled. Not today, buddy. Why? You missed the music. He shook his head. I liked the pictures. People looked at me like I was big. You were big, I said. You were brave. Will Auntie Bianca say sorry? I paused. Maybe. But even if she doesn't, you know who didn't forget you, right? You. Always. He reached over, tugged at the corner of my shirt, and leaned into my side. You made the storm go away. No, I said, wrapping my arm around him. You did. I just held the umbrella. Later that night, Delphina called. I let it ring. She tried again, then sent a text. What about forgiveness? I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied. She told my son he had no value. You agreed. Maybe it's time you both learn yours. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. Some silence you deliver, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you finally understand the weight of what your voice can do. And mine? Mine had already done what it needed to. For my son. For the truth. And for every storm that still waited in someone else's silence. It was 1 week after the vineyard. 7 days since Bianca screamed in front of strangers and stormed out in her bridal gown with nothing but the weight of her pride dragging behind her like that empty, trailing veil. A full week since silence turned to sound, and sound turned to collapse. And now, the ripples had turned into waves, and they were washing over everyone who once believed they were untouchable. I woke up that Monday morning to a message I didn't expect. Not from Bianca. Not from Delphina. From Liam Whitford, Bianca's ex-fiancé. Subject: Thank you. Lucas. I owe you. I didn't know what I was walking into. She hid a lot. Behind the posts, the laugh, the champagne-toasting version of herself she curated for everyone. But the moment I saw that video, I felt like I had escaped something that would have destroyed me quietly, piece by piece. Thank you for stopping it before it started. I hope Silas is healing. I hope you're too. Liam. I stared at the screen, then leaned back in my chair. That was what this had become, a quiet unraveling of what had once looked perfect on the surface. You take away the filters, the choreographed poses, the carefully worded captions, and you get something raw. Something real. Something so many people had seen glimpses of but never felt brave enough to call out. But once the first person speaks, the silence no longer protects anyone. Bianca had lost her deals. She lost Liam. And now, she was losing the world she built around her. One by one, her followers left. Her comment section had turned into a tribunal. She disabled her Instagram for a day, then brought it back with the comments turned off. Too late. Screenshots lived longer than shame. I didn't celebrate it. That wasn't what I felt. It wasn't glee. It was vindication, sure, but coated in something heavier. Not grief, but something close. Not because I pitied her, but because this had never needed to happen. All she had to do was be human. All they had to do was apologize. But they couldn't. Not when pride was easier than remorse. 2 days later, Delphina called again. This time I answered. Not because I wanted to. Because I was ready. She didn't say hello. She got straight to it. We're being ostracized, she said, voice low, breathless. The club rescinded our membership. My sister canceled brunch. People are acting like we're criminals. I let the silence hang between us before I answered. You chose appearances over a child's life, I said. And now appearances are crumbling. I didn't throw him out, she said quickly. That was Bianca. No. You just stood behind her and agreed. You looked at my son and said he needed to learn his value. Do you even hear yourself? I didn't mean it like that. You know how people talk under stress. I cut her off. No, Delphina. People reveal who they are under stress. They say what they buried. And you buried contempt. You didn't see Silas as your grandson. You saw him as a blemish. A disruption to the photo. A voice you couldn't control. She inhaled sharply. You're angry. I understand that. I'm not angry anymore, I said calmly. Anger was for when I had hoped that you'd do the right thing. Now? I'm just done. Her voice cracked next. What about Mariel? What about her? She's still your wife. Is she? The line went quiet. Then she asked, in the softest tone I'd ever heard from her, is there no path back from this? There was, I said. It was the night it happened. When I came to you, when I told you what Bianca did, and you stared at me like I was an inconvenience instead of a father. That was the path. And you burned it. She didn't reply. I didn't wait. I hung up. That night, I found Silas on the couch flipping through a picture book. He had his legs curled under him and his favorite plush Dino tucked between his arm and chest like a trusted shield. Daddy, he asked without looking up, why don't we go see Grandma anymore? I knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. Because sometimes people forget how to be kind. And until they remember, it's safer to be apart. Did I do something wrong? No, Bud, I said, heartbreaking in slow motion. You did everything right. They're the ones who didn't. He nodded slowly. Okay. I kissed his forehead. I didn't know how much of this he'd carry into adulthood, but I wanted one truth to anchor him. None of this was his fault. He was not the problem. He never was. 2 weeks after the event, I received another email. This one from a woman named Paren Ashby, a reporter who ran a podcast about parenting, trauma, and recovery. She'd seen the gallery photos online. Someone had shared a few of the event images with her, particularly the wall of Silas's milestones. She asked if I'd be willing to speak. Not about the drama, not about Bianca, but about what it meant to protect a child's dignity in a world that often demanded they toughen up instead. I said yes. We spoke over Zoom. I told her about the call, about the rain, about the slipper. I told her about the silence I encountered from the people who should have stood beside my son, about how rage wasn't my weapon, truth was, about how I wasn't a hero. I was just a father who didn't walk away, who wouldn't blink again. She asked what justice looked like for me. Justice, I said, isn't a viral post or a canceled party. It's my son growing up knowing he was worth defending. She paused, then said, "That's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard." The episode aired that Friday. It was downloaded more than 80,000 times in 2 days. Messages poured into the podcast's inbox. Messages from parents, teachers, siblings, even therapists. People who had watched family minimize harm, who had seen children brushed aside because it was easier to blame them than face the truth. Some of them reached out to me directly, not for gossip, not to drag Bianca further, but to thank me. One mother wrote, "You reminded me that being quiet is not the same as being kind." I needed to hear that. And me? I just kept building. Building a home where Silas felt safe. Building back the parts of myself I had buried for the sake of politeness. Building forward, not around. Bianca never contacted me. Not directly. But I heard from mutuals that she had moved out of the city. That her influencer career was all but over. That she was seeing a therapist and trying to piece together who she was without applause. I didn't care if she rebuilt. I only cared that she never harmed another child again. Delphina stopped calling. Gerald sent one more message weeks later. This one had no subject line. "I hope one day you'll let Silas know that I regret not standing up for him. That I wish I had been the kind of grandfather he deserved. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand. And I'll be here, quietly, until it's earned." I didn't respond. Maybe one day, but not today. Because forgiveness isn't a door. It's a path. And some people haven't even taken their first step. 6 months passed. The air grew cooler, the leaves turned gold, and Silas started kindergarten with a backpack almost bigger than his body. He held my hand tight that first morning, even as he tried to act brave. He wore his gray hoodie, his favorite, and gave me a toothy smile that almost undid me. "I got it, Daddy," he said, squaring his shoulders like a tiny soldier. "You don't have to walk me in." But I did anyway. Not because he needed me. Because I needed to see him step into a space that wasn't shaped by shame or bruises or silence. And when his teacher knelt to greet him and he smiled without hesitation, I knew we were healing. Slowly, steadily. My business had grown in the background. A quiet tech consultancy I had rebooted from my old startup days. Nothing flashy, just efficient and lean. But the word got around. Clients I thought had forgotten me suddenly remembered. Old investors reached out. I kept it all separate from social media, no big posts, no announcements. Just work, just progress, just the kind of quiet foundation I wanted for Silas. For us, we were okay. Then, one Friday afternoon, a knock at the door broke the rhythm. I wasn't expecting anyone. Silas was still at school. I was midway through drafting a proposal. But something in the weight of that knock made me pause. When I opened the door, she was standing there. Bianca. She looked nothing like the woman from that vineyard day. No makeup, no tailored outfit, no designer anything. Just jeans, a faded gray hoodie that could have been mine, and swollen eyes. In her hands, a manila folder. She didn't smile, didn't force a greeting. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she said quietly. "But I didn't come for forgiveness. I came for him." I stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind me. "Silas isn't home." "I know." I checked the school hours. She looked down at the folder in her hands. I'm trying, Lucas. I really am." Her voice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was tired, worn down to the raw edges. "I've been in therapy," she said, "twice a week, since the video went viral. Not because of the backlash, because of what it forced me to face. What I buried, what I became." I said nothing. I watched her fingers tremble slightly as she extended the folder toward me. "What's this?" "Everything," she said. "Records, session logs, An apology letter I wrote to Silas. A signed statement admitting what I did that night. There's no excuse in it. No explanation. Just the truth. I took the folder slowly, still silent. She stepped back. I don't expect you to believe me, or to let me near him. I wouldn't blame you if you never did. But I didn't want to disappear without leaving something that shows I'm not hiding anymore. I opened the folder just enough to see the handwriting on the first page. Her signature. The words, "I take full responsibility for what I did to Silas Brandt." She didn't wait for me to speak. She backed down the steps. Tell him I'm sorry. Not for what the world saw, but for what he felt. Alone. In the rain. With no one but his father to come get him. Then she turned and left. I didn't call after her. I stood there holding the folder, the weight of it heavier than its size. After a few moments, I walked back inside. Sat at the table. Opened it fully. She hadn't lied. There were typed reports from a licensed therapist. Journal entries, dated and signed. Progress notes. The apology letter was handwritten for pages long, full of shame, clarity, and a quiet line near the end that made me pause. No child should ever have to earn their right to be protected. I failed him. I failed myself. I closed the folder and stared at it. Not because I was moved by her remorse. Because I had something now. Not for her. For Silas. When he came home that afternoon, I didn't show him the folder. He was too young. But I hugged him a little tighter, and he looked up at me with his usual scrunched-up nose. Did something happen? He asked. Someone said sorry today, I said. A real one. He nodded slowly. Good. Saying sorry is how you start making things better. He went off to play with his toys, leaving me stunned by how simple he made it sound. But that was the point. Children aren't born hard. We harden them with silence, with excuses, with the lessons we teach in the shadows. Later that night, I took the folder and placed it in a fireproof box where I kept other important things, birth certificates, legal papers, and the first drawing Silas ever made me. Not because I planned to use it against Bianca. Because one day, when Silas is old enough, when he asks what really happened and why, I want to be able to show him that his pain mattered, that it wasn't ignored, that it changed things, that someone heard his cry in the rain and answered, that someone fought for him, that his dignity was never too small to protect. The folder wasn't a beginning. It wasn't even a closure. But it was a mark, a sign that the storm had passed and what came next was healing. Slow, honest, earned. I turned off the lights, kissed Silas goodnight, and whispered the same thing I had whispered every night since that call. You are safe. You are loved. You are worth everything. And this time, I believed it even deeper. Because now, the world believed it too.